You want to find that drive and focus that has you locked in and on fire every single day? My book, The Mirror of Motivation, will do it for you. I bought a copy for you. You take care of the shipping. The book is free. Click the link down there. I got you.
StrayAllDay.com.
Beautiful day right now because you are tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. Yes, this is the go-getter energy that moves you to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Putting all this together, you get the mindset, the method, the podcast known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is what you learn through conflict. This is an important topic because, first of all, I'll give you a definition of conflict. It is defined as a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted disagreement or argument. Just a quick little, somebody get mad at you for cutting them off in traffic, or you get mad at them. There's a conflict, but it comes and goes because somebody can just drive away and it's over, right? But I'm a protracted situation where you just don't like another person and you got to see them every day. Maybe they're your teammate, maybe they play on one of the other teams and y'all play against each other a few times. Maybe they're a classmate and you see them in school every single day. Maybe it's just a conflict you have with, I don't know, the next door neighbor. What you learn through conflict is what we're talking about here today. A serious disagreement or argument is the definition. You know, the root word of conflict comes from the Latin word conflictus, which means literally, quote, a contest, close quote. Now, while many people, and we've talked about this in detail, many people try their damnedest to avoid all possible conflicts. But I suggest that you don't do that. I suggest that you don't try to avoid conflicts. I talked about this in the episode on 3 daily confidence exercises, which I believe was 1237, I believe is that episode. You can look that up in your podcast feed. If it's not in the feed, then you need to be in the game group so you can get access to everything. 7-day trial for free. Go to workonmygame.com/game group. Many people try their damnedest to avoid conflicts. Don't try to avoid anything. If something's coming your way, don't avoid it. I suggest that you not avoid it, but also at the same time, don't go looking for conflict. All right, don't go trying to start a conflict. Don't go trying to create a conflict. All right, this is not the Fight Club movie. All right, don't just go trying to start a fight with a random person in the street for no reason. All right, don't do that either. But you're not going to run from conflict anymore. All right, conflict is something that you can learn through. It's a great teaching skill. It's also a great revealer of a whole lot of things about us and about others. So that's why conflict is something that you can learn from, something that you can learn to deal with. And this is something that I think, especially in the world that we're in now, where everyone can say anything that they want, anyone can broadcast themselves, anyone can brand and market themselves any way they want from the comfort of their own homes, from the convenience of their own smartphone, that there's going to be more and more conflict. Some of it's going to be real, some of it's not going to be real, but there's just, since there are more ways for people to interact, there'll be more ways for people to have conflict. And in some ways, you could even say that it could be diminished just simply because people don't value as much. It's diminishing value of any interaction simply because we don't think that they're, quote, real just because they're digital. But at the same time, there can be more of them just because there are more of us interacting and more of us being able to connect with more people on a consistent basis, especially if a lot of people know who you are and you have a lot of people paying attention to what you're saying. And especially if you're talking about a certain subject that people tend to get into quick conflicts over, like religion, politics, rap music, Biggie versus Tupac, you know what I'm talking about. So today's topic is what you learn through conflict, a serious disagreement or argument. Point number one. Number one thing that you learn through conflict, if you go through enough of it, is you learn how to control your emotions. This is a very important skill. Controlling your emotions, especially if you plan on doing anything in life in which conflict is inevitable. If you play sports, every game is a conflict. The conflict is your team wants to win the game, but the other team also wants to win the game, and both teams cannot win the game. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. Unless you're playing, I don't know, soccer, football, I guess you could have a tie. But in baseball, basketball, I think you can have a tie in hockey as well. But most of the time, even in sports where you can have a tie, most of the time somebody wins and somebody loses, right? That's a conflict. Boxing match, somebody wants to win that fight and somebody's going to lose that fight. They don't both want to win. I mean, they both want to win. Neither one wants to lose, but somebody's probably going to lose that fight, right? That's a conflict. Sports is conflict. In business, There can be conflict with your competitors, people who are trying to sell to the same people as you, maybe in the same market as you, maybe selling the same product as you, making the same offer, offering the same service. That's conflict. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. So understand that conflict is an inevitable part of life. If you're in business, there's some kind of conflict going on. If you have a job, there's somebody who wanted the job that you have, that you got it and they didn't get it. That's conflict. If you have a business, there's someone who's trying to sell to the same people you're trying to sell to. And if you make a sale, that means that's the money that competitor did not get. That's conflict. If you play a sport, every single day there's a conflict. You got conflict with your own teammates who are trying to get more playing time than you, want to get the ball more often, want to score more points, want to get more shine and attention than you. That's conflict. If you are in a relationship with a desirable person, there's conflict, because there's probably some other person or people out there who wanted the same person you have and they didn't get them. You got them. That's conflict. There's conflict all throughout life. The biggest problem that many people, from what I've seen, biggest problem that many people have with conflict is that it stirs up uncomfortable emotions in people. And when people get uncomfortable, they become unglued. And people don't like to be unglued. People, when I say unglued, what I mean is people lose their presence of mind. Their energy gets off. And they usually end up not getting whatever it is they wanted out of that situation, or getting something that they didn't want out of that conflict situation. So what you need to understand is that why people avoid conflict is not because they're trying to get out of the conflict itself. It's the energy behind the conflict that people really want to avoid. That's why people avoid conflict. This is why people don't learn much from conflict, because they are so blinded by the energy in front of them that they don't even notice how they could be learning from it, or they just want to get the hell out of it. They're not even trying to learn from it. They're just trying to not have to deal with it at all. So there's nothing to learn because nothing to happen. This is what stops a lot of people from dealing with conflict more deftly, more, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Dealing with it with more aplomb. Just dealing with a more, there's another word that I was thinking of that's just slipping my mind right now. I can't think of the word. It'll come to me in a moment. But this is what keeps a lot of people from handling conflict, or even going towards where something might be a conflict, or doing something that could possibly lead to conflict. And this is what leads to a whole lot of us self-editing. You know what self-editing is? Is when we know what we want to do, or we know what we want to say, or we know who we want to be. And we know we have come to a conclusion and this is what we want to do, be, or say. But then we edit ourselves and trim ourselves down and whittle ourselves down a little bit, maybe even a lot. Why? Because we know, or we believe rather, that if we say this thing, or we represent this thing, or we do this thing, that somebody may have a problem with it, and that's going to lead to conflict. And it's not the conflict that we're trying to avoid, it's the negative emotions, the uncomfortable, not negative emotions, the uncomfortable emotions that come with that conflict that we're trying to stay away from. Therefore, we self-edit so nothing bad happens. So we stay kind of smooth and mediocre, right in the middle where everybody accepts us. It's caused a lot of people to self-edit. I know there are a whole lot of self-editors who are listening to me talk right now, and you know that I'm talking about you. But here's the thing about conflict. Again, we're still on the first point. This is where you learn how to control your emotions. You don't learn how to control your emotions in times of everything working, in times of prosperity, in times of everything just going as smoothly as you expected. You don't learn how to control your emotions then, because your emotions are not out of control. When everything's working, we are usually calm and relaxed and at ease because everything's working. Is when things are not working, when there's conflict, when we're trying to achieve something, but someone else is also trying to achieve it, and we can't both get it at the same time, at the same level. That conflict, that's when things start to go off for a lot of people. We get uncomfortable, we become unglued, we lose our presence of mind, our energy gets off, and we usually end up not getting what we want, not because the other person is better than us, but because of all these other things. We're unglued, we lose our presence of mind, we forget our goals. What I tell you about emotions and logic. Emotions are terrible drivers, but great gas pedals. Emotions are great to use as gas, as fuel to push you forward, but you got to use your logic, your presence of mind, to decide which direction to go. And this is what happens when people get in conflict, is that they start allowing their emotions to grab the steering wheel of their car, and now you got your emotions having you do donuts. You know what it means to do donuts when the car is just spinning around in a circle? All right, it's impressive looking, but it's not impressive when you're not trying to do a donut, but you're doing one. All right, that's not a good situation. That's what happens to a lot of people mentally when they get into conflict. They start doing donuts in their vehicle, but they're not stunt drivers. That's a good metaphor right there. And this is what you learn by going through conflict. The energy behind it is what is really bothering you. But the more that you engage in conflict, the more often you deal with it, and not just engage in it, but also assess what happened. That's how you get better about it. When you read about conflict, there are books that are about conflict. I've written books about conflict, the Mental Handbook, the 100 Mental Game Best Practices, the Mirror of Motivation. We talk about conflict in all those books. Work on Your Game. We talk about conflict. Dre Philosophy Volume 0. We talk about conflict in these books. The more you deal with conflict, read about conflict and how it can be handled, assess your own reactions to conflict, even meditate on it. What I mean by meditating on it, everybody knows what meditation is, right? Google it if you don't. But meditating on conflict means if you know there's a situation coming up in which a conflict is inevitable or highly likely, you can meditate on it. Meaning, spend some time thinking about it, contemplating what's going to happen, what might happen, the possible permutations of what may go on, what you're going to say, how you may react, how the other person or people may react, and how you could possibly deal with those reactions and responses. Think about it ahead of time. That forethought will allow you to be much calmer in the moment because you have a strong prediction, at least in your mind, let's just say, for lack of a better term, of what's going to happen. Things that are expected come much more easily to us. That's a stoic philosophy from Louis Seneca. The things that we expect don't bother us as much as things that we don't expect. Even if something bad happens to you or something that you consider to be bad occurs in your life, if you were already expecting it to happen, it doesn't bother you as much as if something bad happens to you and it's a surprise. Can we agree? Okay. So that conflict that you knew was coming, it doesn't stir you up as much because you knew it was coming. You knew they were going to say something, and now you're ready with some ammunition to defend yourself or fight back or whatever you got to do because you knew it was coming. Now, if you didn't know it was coming, now they caught you by surprise. Now they get you on your heels, and this is where the uncomfortable emotions come from. When we're not prepared for the conflict and/or we're trying to avoid the conflict. The more you engage in it, the better you get dealing with it when it happens. And that skill is great for all of life. It's not just for conflict. It'll make you a lot stronger in all of your life and a whole lot more confident, generally speaking, in everything that you do. Point number 2, when you deal with conflict, you will find out how much you can handle and how much you can take on. Episode number 351 on stress testing. I just referenced this a couple days ago, referencing it again, which means you should probably go listen to it again. Even if you were listening back at episode 351, you should listen to this episode again. You're a member of the gang group, you had direct access. Conflict challenges your internal fortitude. That's what conflict does. Conflict is not about your external abilities or your resources or how smart you are or who you know or none of that. Conflict is a challenge of your internal fortitude. And that challenge of your internal fortitude, you know what it leads to many people doing when their internal fortitude is challenged? You know what most people do? What do you do? What have you seen people do? There's one word that I'm looking for. It's a 4-letter word. Quit. Most people quit when their internal fortitude is challenged. And when I say quit, I don't necessarily mean they end their relationship that they're in, or they quit their job, or they fire all their employees, or they just stop playing on whatever team that they're on, or they just walk off the court in the middle of the game. I don't mean quit so much in a literal sense that they quit, tangibly quit, but people quit mentally. And me as a competitor, being an athlete, one of the things that I've talked about this before, and this is something that's really important for those of you who are competitors, especially those of you who are in leadership positions. If you want to find out how much mental internal fortitude another person has, challenge them, push them, get them into a conflict so you can find out just how tough they are. You can find out how much you can push on them before they give in, before they quit, before they mentally quit. They might not tangibly quit, but they'll mentally quit. When I played basketball, I would have teammates who would mentally quit in the middle of a game. They didn't walk off the court. They kept playing, but they had mentally quit. And the great thing about a sport like basketball is that you're half naked when you're playing basketball. You got on shorts and a tank top. Everybody can see your face. It's not hidden behind a face mask or a shield like in hockey or in football. You don't have a hat or a helmet on like in baseball. Everybody can see all of your physical expressions. And you can see it on somebody's face when they mentally quit. And that's what happens in basketball. People will quit in the middle of a game. I've seen opponents do it, which is a good thing. I've seen teammates do it, which is not a good thing. And I've been watching games and seeing people quit in the middle of the game mentally, even though they kept running up and down the court. When you know where somebody's quitting point is, you know where their breaking point is, now you know how far you can push them if they're on your team. And now you know how far to push them if they're not on your team. And if you're the coach, then you know how far you need to keep pushing them to either find out, are they going to get stronger, or are they going to just quit, really quit, and never come back. Conflict challenges that internal fortitude of everyone. And this challenge makes people quit who would rather walk away from a conflict than face the conflict. And you'd be surprised that there are many more people in this world who rather avoid conflict than face it. And let's keep it real. I might be talking about you. You know if I'm talking about you. I'm not 100% sure, but you know if you're the type of person who will rather avoid a conflict than deal with it. I don't need to say any more about that one. If you're an athlete on the team and you're not playing, like I said, there's a conflict between what you think you are and what the coach thinks you are. That's a conflict, right? Every team that I was ever on, though, I'll tell you, there were players who started off the season not playing, and by some point in the season, they were playing. So they dealt with that conflict. Too many people's first thought these days, especially these days, because this is what I'm talking about it these days, so we're going to use these days. Too many people's first thought when they face conflict is to quit without a second thought. So without getting to the second thought, their first thought says quit before this becomes anything bigger, and they walk away from it. Personally, I'm advising you, this is my advice to you today, is to not walk away when you face a conflict. Stand in and face the conflict. And I'm going to tell you why you're going to face the conflict. The more conflict you face, the stronger you'll become in dealing with it, as I already told you, but also the more confident you become. That's another thing that happens. Notice that confidence is a byproduct of damn near every single thing we talk about here on this show. And another thing that happens, the more you face down conflict, the less often it finds you. It's an interesting thing about conflict. Conflict is similar to fear in that it only hunts you down and comes and finds you when it knows you're afraid of it. Fear only bothers people who are habitually fearful, people who just have this natural fear within them. So fear, the energy of fear, the entity of fear knows that if it comes and runs up to you and yells, boo, like a ghost, that you're going to go run away in fear because it knows it knows what kind of response is going to get out of you. It's the same thing with conflict. See, if you're the type of person who always avoids conflict or backs down from conflict or tries to compromise every time conflict comes your way, you're going to find that conflict is happening a lot. To the point, you know what's going to happen? It's going to happen so often it gets to the point that it's not even conflict anymore to you. It's just you rolling over and laying down and having life walk all over you because you don't want to deal with the conflict. So you just let life have its way with you. You let life push you around. This is what happens to a whole lot of people. And I mentioned the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was telling a story about how I became an entrepreneur. I referenced that book as the pivotal book that pushed me over the edge to become an entrepreneur. And one of the things that gets talked about in the first chapter of the book, because I recently listened to the audio book, was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, the guy who taught him about how to be rich, first of all, mentally, then physically, was that he said life pushes people around all the time and most people don't push back. Most people, when they get pushed around by life, they quit. And they don't they don't commit suicide. They don't just go sit on the corner with a tin cup asking for change. What they do is they just accept the situation that life has pushed them into, the corner that life has pushed them into. They just stay there and they never try to get out. And that's what a lot of people do when it comes to conflict. Conflict pushes you into a corner and you just stay there because you don't want to fight to get out of that corner. You don't want to deal with it. And it doesn't even have to be a fight. You don't want to deal with the uncomfortable energies, the energies that are uncomfortable to you, that would be required in order for you to deal with that conflict. And the thing that I'm telling you about conflict, this third benefit of it. First one is that you make yourself stronger. Second one is you become more confident. And the third one is the more you deal with conflict and the more willing you are to handle conflict when it comes your way, the less often you'll have to deal with it because conflict won't come looking for you because it knows what's going to happen. It knows that it can't push you around. It knows that it can't bully you. It knows that it can't bother you. It knows that it doesn't stir up uncomfortable emotions in you. Therefore, it's going to leave you alone. It's going to go find a more willing victim. And you can swap out everything that I just said there, conflict, with bullies. Any of you ever known or dealt with, maybe you even been like a schoolyard bully or a neighborhood bully? All right, bullies don't deal with people who fight back. Conflict is a bully. And I'm not talking about conflict as in a certain person or an argument. I'm talking about the energy of conflict. It's a bully. Conflict only finds you over and over and over again when you're the type of person who backs down and doesn't do anything back. Doesn't fight back, doesn't stand your ground. When you're a person who stands your ground and you fight back against conflict, you'll notice in very short order that conflict doesn't happen too often. And when it does, you're completely comfortable dealing with it. You almost are happy that it happened because you get a chance to test yourself and don't let your sword get rusty. All right, don't let your axe get rusty when you deal with that conflict. But today, many people's first thought when they face conflict is to quit. They don't even get to the second thought. They just quit immediately because they don't want to have to deal with the conflict. I'm just gave you a whole lot on why you need to deal with it. We're not even done. A lot of people these days like to use the word disrespect. All right, when when somebody hasn't earned any respect, they say they're being disrespected. Well, you haven't earned any respect to be disrespected. All right, the only thing you've earned is disrespect. So you can't be being disrespected if you haven't earned respect yet. Athletes, you sitting at the end of the bench, you've never been a starter, so how are you being disrespected by being at the end of the bench? You are being properly treated. All right, that's who you are. That's what you've earned to this point. You're not being disrespected. That's who you are. Now, when you earn a starting spot and they put you on the bench, now that's disrespect. But if you ain't never been there before, then what are you talking about? What are you comparing it to? My high school senior year, playing varsity basketball. First game of the season. This is a true story. We were playing a preseason game, and there was a teammate of mine who was also a senior. He was also just making the basketball team for the first time. He and I had our last names both started with the letter B. So we were in the same homeroom classroom. So me and this guy sat, I sat right in front of him in class, in our homeroom class every day in high school. So my senior year, we were in the same class, homeroom, we saw each other every single day. First game of the season, right? He and I were sitting next to each other on the bench because neither of us was that high in the rotation at the beginning of the year, at least. We are losing the first game. We're down by 15, 20 points or something. The game's pretty much over. It's about a minute and a half left in the game. Me and this guy, this teammate, were both sitting there. I had played a little bit. I had played 3 or 4 minutes in the game because I was a quote unquote big man. Based on the size of the team we had, our tallest guy was 6'4". I think I was the 3rd or 4th, maybe the 5th tallest guy on the basketball team. So I got in the game simply because we didn't have that many quote unquote big men. So I got in the game before him. This guy, he was 5'11", 6 feet. He was a guard. We had a lot of guards. He didn't get in the game the whole game. So I got 3 or 4 minutes. He got no minutes. End of the game, though, the coach decides to put him in the game. It's about 90 seconds left. And as the coach comes over to him and says, hey, get in there, get yourself a minute or two, the player says to the coach, I don't want to play. And he said it in a disdainful way, I don't want to get in the game, man. And the coach was like, what? This is in the middle of the game. And the player says, I don't want to go in the game. And the coach told him, get off the bench, go to the locker room, get out of here. And we get back in the locker room. And the player's there in the locker room. The coach addresses him in front of the whole team and says, hey, what the hell was that? You talking about you don't want to get in the game. By this point, this player had already changed his clothes and dressed and everything. And he was like, why? What the hell are you doing? What are you talking about? You don't want to get in the game. And mind you, he had just made the basketball team for the first time in 4 years, first game of the season. And the guy says, are you going to put me in the game at the end like that? Disrespecting me. And the coach was like, all right, just get the hell out of here. He was off the team. That was it. He was on the basketball team for 1 game, didn't even play. This whole 4 years, this player. Now, the next day in school, this same guy, I see him in class as usual, and I said to him yo, what the hell are you doing? Why did you just quit the basketball team 1 game into the season? Dude, you could have earned some playing time over the course of the season. I understand he was kind of pissed because he didn't get in the game, but listen, there was a lot of people that didn't get in that game. I only played 3 or 4 minutes in the game. Not everybody's going to play a lot on the basketball team. Only 5 people be on the court at a time. We had about 14 people on the roster at that time, and I asked him why he quit the way that he did. And he looked at me and he said, and he still had a little bit of palpable anger in his voice. He was like, because he disrespected me. How you going to put me in the game with a minute left? Like I'm some bum ass player. He said something along those lines. Like, you're going to put me in the game with a minute left. I'm thinking to myself, I didn't argue with the guy because he wasn't my friend. We just knew each other because we sat next to each other in the class. But he was saying that he was being disrespected. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, you ain't even been on the team before. You haven't achieved anything. Nobody knows your name. You have no accomplishments under your belt in the game of basketball. How are you being disrespected? What respect have you earned? None. But anyway, let's move on to point number 3. Today's topic is what you learn through handling conflict. Number 3, you learn these same things. Everything we talked about here so far today, you learn these same things about everybody else. Because when you're dealing with conflict, usually there are people involved, right? If you're in an argument with somebody, that's another person. They're dealing with conflict just as you are. If you're in a business and there's a competitor, that's a conflict. There's another person at that business, right? If you're on a sports team and you're trying to score and somebody's trying to stop you, that person's dealing with the same conflict you're dealing with. You're trying to score, they're in the way, and they're looking at you like you're trying to score and they're in the way. There's a conflict. Most conflicts involve other people. So the same things you learn about yourself when you're dealing with conflict, you can also learn about others when they're dealing with the same conflict you're dealing with. Maybe you can learn something from how another person deals with conflict. Maybe you can learn something from how another person deals with an argument. What can you learn about a person? If you want to learn about a person, let me tell you some things you can pay attention to anytime you see a conflict, whether you're an innocent bystander to a conflict or you're an active participant in a conflict. Watch how they address a conflict. Do they address a conflict? If they have a problem with another person, do they go to that person, knowing where that person is, go to that person and deal with it right there and talk to them? Or do they act like it isn't happening and try to deal with it passively? Actually, not. If it's passively, you're not dealing with it. All right, so those don't go together. So excuse me for even saying that, putting those words together. Do they go and address? Again, let me ask this question again, because this is an important one. When there is a conflict, do you or the other person that you're watching, do they go and address the situation with whomever they need to address it with when that person's available? Or do they act like nothing happened and passively handle it? In other words, do nothing. Avoid it even. What do they do? What do you do? Does a person or you, and when I say a person, I can be talking about you too, do they fly off the handle when a conflict happens? I remember I was at a basketball court. I was in Tampa Bay, Florida. This was over 10 years ago. I was playing outdoor pickup basketball, and there was this guy at the court. I can't remember this dude's name. He was a cool guy. Young dude, maybe a year or two younger than me. I remember he had dreads. He was a real calm, friendly dude. Every time I seen him, he would say, "What's up?" to me. He'd always be smiling, shake my hand. Real friendly guy all the time, right? So we're playing a basketball pickup game. This outdoor court is a bunch of people outside. This guy has the ball. He drives to the basket. He gets fouled. And this is something that happens with basketball, especially with men playing basketball. I never really understood why it was, but this is the thing. When a basketball player playing pickup basketball gets hit anywhere in their face, I've seen dudes get so angry that I don't understand it. What is it about getting hit in the face that makes people so mad? Like, I see dudes get hacked all over their back, their arms, their chest, their legs. They fall down, they get tripped. Don't get mad. They just keep playing. They get happy that they got fouled. They're like, yeah, you got to foul me. That's the only way you can stop me. But if somebody gets even touched in their face in a basketball game of a foul, I've seen dudes go from like 0 to Incredible Hulk just because they got hit in the face. I remember once back in my hometown of Philadelphia, this dude got hit in the face as he got fouled during the game. Somebody hit him in the face inadvertently, and he punted the basketball. Like, he drop kicked the basketball up to the ceiling, put a hole in the ball. He kicked it so hard because he was mad that he had got hit in the face. I've never understood what it is about getting fouled in the face that makes people so angry as opposed to getting hit anywhere else in their body. But anyway, this guy, back to my story, Tampa Bay, this guy gets fouled. He gets hit in the face, and he turns into Incredible Hulk. And this dude was the friendliest dude, always smiling, always happy every time I seen him. And he starts yelling and screaming about how he might have to fight somebody. And I mean, it was crazy. Like, he just flipped, the switch just flipped on him immediately as soon as he got hit in his face. And then he went right back to being normal like a few minutes later. And I'm pointing that out to ask you, this is the question. This is the thing I want you to watch for when people are in conflict. Do they fly off the handle? Do they just get out of control way too? Their energy is very, very much disproportionate to what actually happened. I've seen this happen to a lot of people. And this is aggression, but it's too much aggression. All right. Your aggression is a good thing. Because I have no problem with aggression. I'm an advocate of being aggressive, but in a controlled way. Your aggression needs to be under control. You need to have control of what you're doing every minute that you're doing something. All right. You don't want to ever lose control of your emotions and lose control of your actions. Never let your emotions grab the steering wheel. That's what happened with this guy. Do they fly off the handle when something happens? Are they the type of person who runs away and avoids or gets passive when it comes to conflict? When they know there's a conflict, but they get passive about it and act like they have no idea what's going on. There was a situation, I'm not going to give too much detail about this. There's a certain person who there was a conversation that needed to happen between me and an individual person. This is something that happened in person here in South Florida. And this person knew that there was a conversation that needed to happen. I seen this individual and I said to them, yo, like, let's have a conversation about this thing that we need to address. And the first thing this person said to me, and this is what I want you to get from this first thing this person said when I approached them, they said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. And that is what I call avoidance. That's being passive. That's acting like you don't know there's something to be addressed when there's a big ass elephant standing right next to you in the room. All right. Notice if you do that when there's conflict, and notice in other people. Are they the type of person to do that, to become passive when there's a situation that needs to be dealt with? Or does somebody become passive aggressive? Passive aggressive is they have the aggressive energy. They want to let it out, but they don't have the confidence to do so. So they let it out passively. It's kind of like if you have a balloon that's filled up with air, but you let a little bit out, then you squeeze it back, then you let a little bit more air out, squeeze it out, a little bit more, squeeze it out, then squeeze it back so the air can't all come out at once. That's passive aggression. Notice if people have that passive aggressive habit, if you have it. And I know that you listening to this right now, I would bet 75% of the people listening to this right now have the habit of passive aggression, because this is just what most people do these days, because most people do not like the feeling of being directly aggressive, because it makes them feel like it's too much conflict. Their energy gets out of control. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Do people try to compromise and head off conflict from happening? Now, I'm not saying that this is a good or bad thing. But notice, again, this is what I want you to start observing in other people. When there's a conflict, do they try to compromise it and head it off from happening, or do they just deal with it straight up? Whatever happens, happens. Do they pretend that it's not happening? Do they act like there's no conflict when there surely is a conflict? This is, again, passivity or aggression. Which one do they do? Conflict is here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Conflict is an excellent case study in human emotions and human character. You want to learn about people? You want to study human beings? The best way to study people is to watch them when they are in conflict. When there is some kind of conflict going on, whether in their mind, with another person, with a situation, maybe a combination of all three, you will find a whole lot out about a person, and you'll find out a whole lot about yourself when conflict occurs. Don't watch people when everything's going good, because people can control themselves when things are going good. It's when conflict happens and people start to lose that firm grip on their emotions, that's when you learn who they really are. Let's recap today's topic, which is what you learn through conflict, defined as a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted disagreement or argument. The root word of conflict is the Latin conflictus, meaning a contest. While many people try their damnedest to avoid conflicts, I suggest that you don't avoid it, but also don't go looking for or starting it either. Today I'm going to tell you why. Number one, in conflict, you learn how to control your emotions, or you learn how much control you don't have over your emotions. The biggest problem people have with conflict is that it stirs up uncomfortable emotions in people. And when people's emotions go off, their energy goes off. They become unglued. They lose their presence of mind. Their emotions grab the steering wheel of their car. They start doing donuts, and they're not even trying to do donuts. And they usually end up not getting the outcome that they want. So it's not the conflict itself that bothers people. It's the energy behind the conflict that bothers people. And that's why so many people avoid conflict at all costs. But understand, you cannot grow and get better without conflict. If you have big muscles, there was a conflict between your muscles and the weight that you were lifting in the gym. Without that conflict, you won't have big muscles and you won't be able to maintain them. That conflict is necessary. In order for you to grow, there has to be some conflict between who you are today and who you're going to be tomorrow. If you don't want to deal with that conflict, it is impossible for you to get better. Point number two. Actually, more on point number one. The more you engage in conflict, not because you're trying to create it, but because you just deal with it, you read about conflict, you assess your reactions, even meditate on conflict that you know is inevitable, the more steady you will be when conflict occurs. And that is a great skill for all of life. Number two, you find out how much you can handle, how much you can take on. Episode 351 referred to stress testing. That's the topic. Conflict challenges your internal fortitude, and these challenges causes many people to quit. Most people would rather walk away from conflict than face it, or run away, or avoid it, or don't go anywhere near it than actually deal with it face up. If you're an athlete, there's conflict in everything that you do. Between your teammates, your opponents, even your coaches, there's a conflict that is happening. You're in business, there's conflict. Too many people's first thought when facing conflict is to quit without a second thought. Some people say they're being disrespected. Instead of dealing with the conflict of where they are compared to what people think they are, they say they're being disrespected and use that as a pretext to quit, when really what it is being passive. You're not dealing with the thing head on. You rather run away and act like it's not happening. Point number three, you learn the same things about yourself you learn about other people. When you see a conflict, ask yourself, how does that person address the conflict? Do they fly off the handle and lose control of their emotions in a aggressive way? Do they lose control of their emotions in a passive avoidance way? Do they run away and avoid the conflict? Do they become passive aggressive? Do they try to compromise and head off the conflict from happening? Do they pretend the conflict's not happening even though there's a 3,000 pound elephant standing in the room right next to them? Conflict is a great case study in human emotions and human character if you pay attention, and you are mentally tough enough to stand in and deal with the conflict when it happens. The best book that I've written on dealing with conflict is my book, 100 Mental Game Best Practices, which you can get at workonmygame.com/100. That's the number 100. That is 100 Mental Game Best Practices, workonmygame.com/100. Or get that book as part of the 4-book Bulletproof Bundle at workonmygame.com/BB. Work on your game. Dre all day.